A compromise about how to count slaves. The northern and southern states tried to dominate each other at the Constitutional Convention. Slavery became an important issue at the Constitutional Convention. The southern states wanted to count the slaves as part of their population, so the Southerners would have more representatives in the House of Representatives. But slaves were not allowed to become citizens or to vote. There were big differences in how people lived and worked in different regions of the country. The northern and southern states tried to dominate each other at the Constitutional Convention. The biggest difference between the northern and southern states concerned slavery. In the southern states, there were many slaves because the economy was based on slavery. In the northern states, the economy was not based on using slaves. During the Revolutionary War, Massachusetts banned slavery, and in other northern states, such as Pennsylvania, slavery was gradually being done away with. Slavery became an important issue at the Constitutional Convention. The Constitutional Convention had already decided that votes in one part of Congress, the House of Representatives, were going to be based on population. The more people in a state, the more representatives that state would have in the House of Representatives. The southern states wanted to count the slaves as part of their population, so the Southerners would have more representatives in the House of Representatives. But slaves were not allowed to become citizens or to vote. Northerners didn't agree with the South. Many Northerners thought slavery was wrong. They said that because slaves weren't allowed to vote, they shouldn't count for representation in Congress. The Northerners wanted Southerners to pay taxes for their slaves because the Southerners thought of the slaves as property. Many of the representatives of the northern states did not want the South to be able to count slaves in the state's population. Few Northerners held slaves, and many Northerners thought slavery was wrong. Northerners did not want the southern states to have any advantage in Congress. So the Northerners said that because slaves weren't allowed to vote, they shouldn't count for representation in Congress. The Northerners also said that because the slaves were treated as property, they should be counted as property, and their owners should pay taxes on them. There were furious arguments about slavery. Some representatives threatened to go home. Solution to the problem of counting slaves. The 3/5 Compromise helped keep the states united. The Southerners would have to pay taxes for 3/5 of the slaves. The southern states would be able to count 3/5 of the slaves as part of their population. This gave them more representatives in the House of Representatives. The solution to the disagreement on how to count slaves was another compromise. Although it sounds strange at first, you might have been able to predict the solution if you thought like people thought in 1787. The representatives decided that each slave would be counted as property for taxes, but only at 3/5 of full value. For example, if a slave was worth $500, the only owner would be taxed based on a value of $300. The representatives then agreed to count the slaves for representation in Congress, but only at 3/5 value. Historians believe that compromise was the only one the representatives could have made to keep the southern states at the convention. The representatives at the convention felt it was important to compromise in order to keep the states united. Although many northern delegates were against slavery, they compromised their feelings about slavery in order to create a new constitution. In the end, the Constitution left the issue of slavery to the individual states. Most northern states gradually did away with slavery completely. The southern states said that slavery would still be permitted. The issue of slavery would eventually end in a terrible civil war.